They had everything: money, power, fame. But at what cost? Some say deals were made, contracts signed in blood, and unseen hands pulled the strings behind their meteoric rise. Careers that exploded overnight, scandals that vanished without a trace, and eerie confessions hinting at something far darker beneath the surface. Were these celebrities simply lucky, or did they pay a price they can never take back? Gloria Swanson. She was one of the ultimate divas of old Hollywood. Not just a talented actress, she was also a woman who knew how to play the game, and boy did she play it well. Here's the juicy bit. Gloria Swanson reportedly had a long-running affair with none other than Joseph P. Kennedy. Yes, the patriarch of the famous Kennedy clan. This wasn't just your average Hollywood fling. Kennedy was a powerhouse in the business world, and he had connections that could make or break someone's career. Swanson, being as savvy as she was, seemed to understand that very well. The rumor mill says that Kennedy didn't just shower her with affection, he also showered her with cash. It's believed that he financed some of her films, most notably Queen Kelly, a project that ended up being an absolute disaster. But here's the twist. Even though the movie flopped, the whole situation kept Swanson's name in the headlines. At that time, staying relevant was half the battle in Hollywood, and she knew how to turn controversy into a spotlight. Kennedy, on the other hand, probably saw Swanson as more than just a romantic interest. She was a glamorous, high-profile star, and being associated with her elevated his image too. It was one of those mutually beneficial arrangements. She got the funding and career boost, and he got to rub elbows with Hollywood royalty. Of course, all of this was happening while Kennedy was very much married. It wasn't exactly a secret either. Back then, Hollywood wasn't as tightly sealed as it liked to pretend. People talked, whispers turned into rumors, and those rumors only made Swanson seem more intriguing. If anything, the affair added to her mystique as this unapologetic, larger-than-life figure who did whatever it took to stay on top. Now, whether Gloria was selling her soul or simply playing the cards she was dealt is up for debate. But one thing's for sure. She wasn't just sitting around waiting for success to come knocking. She knew how to make the system work for her, and her relationship with Kennedy is one of those stories that shows just how intertwined love, power, and ambition could be in the golden days of Hollywood. Betty Grable. Grable's story because it's a perfect example of how Hollywood could take someone's image, package it up, and sell it to the world, whether they liked it or not. Betty Grable was already a star, but during World War II she became the ultimate pin-up girl. You know that iconic photo of her looking over her shoulder in a bathing suit? Yeah, that wasn't just a cute snapshot. It was a carefully calculated move by the studio to make her the face and legs of wartime morale. Soldiers plastered her photo on lockers, walls, and barracks across the globe. She wasn't just famous, she was a full-blown phenomenon. But here's the thing, Betty wasn't just a pretty face. She was a talented actress, dancer, and singer. The girl had serious skills. However, the studio saw more money in promoting her as a blonde bombshell rather than focusing on her actual talents. They leaned so hard into her pin-up queen persona that it basically overshadowed everything else she could do. And let's talk about those legs. Her legs were insured for a whopping $1 million, a ridiculous amount back then. The press loved it, and the studio made sure to milk that gimmick for all it was worth. Suddenly, it wasn't just Betty Grable the performer, it was Betty Grable, the woman with the $1 million legs. To be fair, it worked. She became one of the highest-paid stars of the 1940s and a household name. But imagine being so much more than just a pretty picture and watching the world and the studio reduce you to your looks. Betty played along because, well, what choice did she have? Back then, the studios owned you, and if they decided you were going to be the pin-up girl, that's who you were. Even though her talents didn't always get the recognition they deserved, there's no denying Betty Grable left a huge mark on Hollywood and the war effort. She wasn't just a pretty picture to those soldiers. She was a symbol of hope and home. But behind all the glam, you have to wonder if she ever got tired of being celebrated more for her legs than her voice or her acting chops. Robert Mitchum. A legend in film noir, Mitchum was known for his deep voice, gravelly demeanor, and his ability to play characters with a dark edge. But beyond the cool exterior was a man who fully embraced the bad boy persona, both in his roles and his real life. Mitchum's most famous brush with scandal came in 1948 when he was arrested for marijuana possession. At the time, marijuana was seen as a taboo and scandalous drug, and Mitchum's arrest was a major blow to his career. He spent a short time in jail, but what set him apart from other stars caught in a scandal was his nonchalant attitude toward the whole situation. He didn't apologize or shy away from the press. Instead, he leaned into the bad boy image even more. For Mitchum, the scandal wasn't something to hide from. It was just another chapter in his hard-boiled persona. Mae Murray. She was one of those old Hollywood stars who made a huge splash early on, but ultimately got caught up in her own image and ambition. She was gorgeous, glamorous, and full of charisma, but her journey to fame wasn't exactly built on hard work and talent alone. She knew how to use her relationships and her own vanity to climb the ladder. Murray had this larger-than-life persona, and let's just say she didn't mind showing it off. She wasn't shy about using her beauty and her connections to get ahead in Hollywood. At a time when the studio system pretty much controlled everything, she made sure she was in the spotlight. If she had to charm some powerful men or play a few cards with her relationships, she was all for it. But here's the thing, it wasn't just about the work for Mae, it was about the image. She was obsessed with being the star, the center of attention. Hollywood at the time loved those kind of it girls who were constantly in the press, feeding the public's need for gossip and glamour, and Mae gave them all that. But in the end, her extreme vanity, coupled with some questionable choices in her personal life, made it hard for her to hold on to her career as the years went on. You see, once her looks started to fade, she didn't have much else to lean on. Her talent didn't quite match up to her early fame, and the studios that had once adored her quickly moved on to newer, fresher faces. As the public lost interest, so did the money and the roles. She went from living the high life to financial ruin. All those relationships and manipulative tactics that helped her in the beginning couldn't save her when the studios decided they had enough of her. Jean Seberg. She was a young actress with a ton of promise, breaking onto the scene with Breathless, one of the most iconic French New Wave films. She had the looks, the talent, and all the right connections, but things took a turn when her personal life got dragged into the spotlight, and not in the way she probably hoped. Seberg was one of those stars who didn't just stick to the usual Hollywood script. She got involved with some pretty controversial political causes, especially supporting black civil rights movements. In the late 60s, she became vocal about her support for groups like the Black Panthers, and that was enough to turn the media and the studios against her. The studios weren't happy about this. Back then, you were supposed to be picture perfect, the wholesome starlet who stayed out of politics and drama. But Jean, she was out there, making statements, getting involved, and living a life that was real. And that didn't sit well with the Hollywood machine. So naturally, they started to exploit her personal life even more, turning her into a target for public gossip. But the real kicker came from the FBI. Yep, the FBI got involved in a huge way. Jean's activism made her a target of surveillance, and they even planted false stories in the media to make her look unstable. They went so far as to fabricate rumors that she was pregnant by a Black Panther member, which led to a media frenzy. Imagine how that must have felt. Her reputation being ripped apart by the very people who were supposed to support her career. Now, the more the media and FBI dug into her life, the more they kept her in the spotlight. But it wasn't the kind of fame that's fun and glamorous. It was the kind of fame that makes you paranoid, out of control, and ultimately miserable. Her career stalled, her personal life suffered, and Jean was constantly under pressure, both from the media and the government. At the end of the day, Seberg's story is a tragic one. She didn't just lose her reputation because of her actions. She was used by both the media and the FBI. They kept her in the news, but it wasn't for anything good. It was for controversy. Jean became more of a symbol than a person, and her career never really recovered from the damage. Dorothy Dandridge. Known as one of the first black actresses to break through Hollywood's color barrier and become a legitimate star, Dorothy was one of the best things to happen to Hollywood. But despite her immense talent and beauty, she found herself trapped in a system that would only let her shine if she fit into certain stereotypes, especially when it came to her race. Back in the day, Hollywood had a pretty messed up way of dealing with black actors, especially actresses. If you were black, chances were you were either cast in a stereotypical role, usually as a servant, maid, or exotic other, or if you were lucky, you'd be allowed to play the tragic mulatto or a hypersexualized figure. And guess which category Dorothy got shoved into? Yep, the latter. She was extremely talented. She could act, sing, dance, and perform with anyone. But in order to secure roles, especially the big ones, Dorothy often had to lean into these racist, over-sexualized portrayals of black women that the studios pushed on her. Instead of being able to play a range of characters, she found herself boxed into roles that emphasized her looks over her skills and her sexual allure over her depth as an actress. It was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it helped her get parts, and she became one of the most famous black actresses of the 1950s, even earning an Academy Award nomination for her role in Carmen Jones. On the other hand, it meant she had to suppress parts of herself, sacrificing her true potential as an artist just to get in the door. And behind all of that, Dorothy faced a ton of racism, both in Hollywood and in her personal life. Studios were fine with using her for her looks, but when it came to real opportunities, she was constantly sidelined. She was one of the few black actresses who had the potential to become a true A-list star, but the industry made it nearly impossible for her to transcend the stereotypes that were forced on her. Her career might have been built on her ability to play the sultry, exotic beauty, but it came at a huge personal cost. Dorothy had to endure a constant battle between her ambition and the racism that was woven into the very fabric of Hollywood. It wasn't until later in her life that people began to recognize the talent she'd been forced to hide for years, but by then, the damage had been done. Theda Bara. With a reputation as the first vamp in Hollywood, this seductive, mysterious woman could make men fall under her spell. But here's the twist. Everything about her persona was carefully crafted by the studios to build that exact image, and a lot of what we think we know about her life is, well, total fiction. Theda was born Theodosia Burr Goodman, but when she was signed by Fox Studios in the 1910s, they decided she needed a more glamorous exotic name, something that would make her stand out as the ultimate femme fatale. Enter Theda Bara, which sounded a lot more sultry and mysterious, but that was just the beginning. The studios didn't stop at her name. They created an entire backstory for her. They spun a tale that she was the daughter of a French mother and an Egyptian father, born in the desert, raised in Europe. Basically, the stuff of movie fantasy. The truth? She was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, to Jewish parents. But why let the truth get in the way of a good story, right? They made her into this exotic seductress, playing up the otherness of her heritage to fit the allure of the characters she played on screen. It was all part of the larger-than-life persona they were building for her. And let's not forget how the media helped fuel the fire. Theda was one of the first stars to be turned into a full-blown media creation, with her every move scrutinized and sensationalized. Her roles as mysterious, dangerous women who entranced men played perfectly into the public's fascination with scandal and intrigue, and the studios fed into that by pushing the idea that she was just as wild and provocative off-screen as she was in front of the camera. In a way, Theda Bara's rise to fame was one big marketing stunt. She was the embodiment of the vamp archetype, and the studio used that image to propel her into stardom, regardless of the reality behind it. She became the symbol of seduction, the dangerous woman who could never be tamed, and that image worked, at least for a time. But the thing is, once the studio-created persona faded, Theda's career didn't have much to stand on. She wasn't as versatile as other actresses, and when the vamp image started to feel outdated in the 1920s, her popularity took a nosedive. The whole thing was built on an illusion, and once people started to see behind the curtain, it was hard to maintain the mystique. Theda's life and career were emblematic of Hollywood's early obsession with creating characters and stories that weren't necessarily true but sold well. In the end, her fame was based on a persona that was as fabricated as a Hollywood script, and that's what makes her story so fascinating. The real woman behind the vamp might not have been as mysterious, but she was still a key figure in shaping the way Hollywood used fame, glamour, and fiction to build stars. Joan Collins. She clawed her way to the top, leaving a trail of jaw-dropping stories and scandalous decisions in her wake. Known for her roles as the ultimate femme fatale both on and off the screen, Joan's journey to fame wasn't exactly wholesome. If there was a line, Joan wasn't afraid to cross it, and sometimes she erased it altogether. Joan's early years in Hollywood were a masterclass in doing whatever it took to stay relevant. She entered the scene in the 1950s with her stunning looks and sultry charm, but she quickly learned that talent wasn't enough in the cutthroat world of showbiz. Studios wanted her to sell sex appeal, and Joan obliged, taking on roles that often required her to be the temptress or the other woman. She became a tabloid fixture, with her personal life often overshadowing her work. But what really cemented Joan as a scandal magnet was her unapologetic willingness to leverage her personal life for publicity. She had a string of high-profile relationships and marriages, each one more dramatic than the last. Joan wasn't afraid to use these romances to keep her name in the headlines. Some even whispered that she strategically dated or married powerful men in the industry to secure better roles. And then there were the stories of Joan's alleged feuds and rivalries. She was known for her diva behavior on set, often clashing with directors and co-stars. Joan reportedly demanded the best costumes, the best lighting, and the most screen time. If she didn't get it, she wasn't afraid to let everyone know. In an industry where actresses were often expected to be compliant, Joan's fiery personality set her apart, and not always in a good way. The 1980s brought Joan's career-defining role as Alexis Carrington on Dynasty, where she fully embraced her persona as the queen of drama. Behind the scenes, Joan wielded her newfound power like a weapon, negotiating lucrative contracts and ensuring that she was always the center of attention. The role didn't just make her a star, it made her a pop culture icon. Joan's unapologetic approach to fame didn't sit well with everyone, but she didn't care. She knew that Hollywood was a game, and she played it better than most. From posing for provocative photos to spilling juicy details about her life in interviews, Joan mastered the art of staying relevant, no matter how shocking the headlines. Carole Lombard. She was one of those stars who managed to have it all: talent, beauty, and that magnetic charm that just drew people in. She wasn't just another pretty face. Lombard had an incredible comedic timing that made her the queen of screwball comedies in the 1930s and early 40s. Think My Man Godfrey or Nothing Sacred. She nailed those quirky, fast-talking roles, and audiences adored her for it. But what really set her apart wasn't just her humor. It was her undeniable ambition and savvy understanding of Hollywood. Lombard wasn't just sitting around waiting for opportunities to come her way. She was a hustler in the best way possible, always pushing forward and making sure she stayed at the top. And let's be honest, she used her relationships to help get there. One of the most famous and most strategic was her marriage to Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood. Their whirlwind romance, followed by their high-profile marriage in 1939, made them the power couple of the moment. It wasn't just about love. It was a partnership that elevated both of their careers. Gable, of course, was already a huge star, but Lombard's sharp, clever wit and public image gave him an even more polished, glamorous aura. She was his perfect match in terms of stardom and status. But here's the thing about Lombard. She knew exactly how to use the Hollywood system to her advantage. The studios loved her, not just because she was a great actress, but because she knew how to work her image. She had that effortlessly glamorous look, but she wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty either. She wasn't your typical damsel or love interest like many other actresses of her time. Lombard had her own voice and wasn't afraid to use it, both on-screen and off. Kim Novak. No doubt Kim Novak was one of the brightest stars of the 50s, known for her beauty, mystery, and that perfect, dreamy look that made her the epitome of Hollywood glamour. But behind all that charm, her career wasn't exactly as picture-perfect as it seemed. Novak's rise to fame wasn't just about her talent, though she definitely had that in spades. It was also about how she was molded by the studio system. At the time, studios controlled everything, including how stars looked, acted, and even what they said. Novak was reportedly pushed by the powers that be to change her appearance. It wasn't uncommon back then for studios to pressure actresses into undergoing surgery to meet the so-called ideal beauty standards. For Novak, this included altering her natural features to fit the mold of the perfect Hollywood starlet. In the eyes of the public, Novak often came across as this flawless, ethereal beauty. But behind the scenes, she was often seen as a plastic product of Hollywood's obsession with perfection and physical appearance. She was the kind of star that, while adored, was also a symbol of the pressure actresses faced to look a certain way to stay relevant in an industry that valued looks above all else. While Novak's career soared for a while, it wasn't without its toll. She struggled with the pressure to maintain this perfect image, and as time went on, the stress of constantly being reshaped by the industry took its toll on her. It's a bit of a tragic story, really. How one of Hollywood's most beloved stars was so heavily controlled by the very system that made her famous.